Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia, and I've been on a ketogenic diet for 3 years. When I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've also lost about 80 pounds, and I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of both my progress through ketosis and Richard's experience thriving for years in ketosis.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
Mm-mm.
We have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind them. We hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite research supporting any claims that we make.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies. We love to cook and we love to eat. In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot be ignored.
Ignore it, I dare you.
I dare ya. So let's start podcast number 74. Dr. Jeffry Gerber speaks. So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
That was with Melanie from the Heal Clinics. Man, she was full of energy, wasn't she?
Oh, my God. I was just blown away by her energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah, I don't think we have any corrections or apologies from that week, but if anyone hears anything that they disagree with, you know what to do.
Right. So let's revisit what a ketogenic diet is. Ketogenic diet is any diet that puts you in a state of nutritional ketosis where you're burning body fat for fuel. And protein is moderate, so 1 to 1.5 grams of protein for every kilogram of lean body mass, which is what you'd weigh without body fat.
Right.
And then we get all of our energy from fat. Yeah.
That's right, the fat on your plate or that ancient Krispy Kreme that you ate a decade ago and stored on your hips.
Exactly. So, buddy, how was your week?
Yeah, it was awesome. I've been getting ready for Keto Fest, and one of the things I've been doing is I have a cooking demo to do. And in 30 minutes, I'm going to demo 6 different meals made with pulled beef. And so I've been prepping those. I've been timing myself and making sure that I've got the best possible recipe that I can use for each of these 6 recipes. So it's going to be a big task, but I think it's going to be fun.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fun.
How was your week, Carl?
Been great. Yeah, I'm doing the same. I'm running around like the proverbial chicken with its proverbial head proverbially cut off. And lots of big boxes are arriving at my house and unpacking things and moving things around and getting ready. I can't wait, man. The excitement is growing.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work doing one of these festival things, but it's going to be fun. It's like about 250 people all showing up.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're going to turn New London, Connecticut keto.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
I think it's the first time anywhere anyone has ever tried to turn a US town keto, even for just a weekend.
Yeah. I'd be very surprised if it's happened before.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is the portion of the show where we give away swag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you get swag, Carl?
You get swag by joining the Two Keto Dudes fan club.
Right.
And if you go to fanclub.2keto.com, just answer a couple of questions, and literally they're like 5 dumb questions. You're in, and every show you'll be eligible to win something. And right now we're giving away coffee mugs with our mugs on them. Today's winner is Wanda Jane Washington. Yeah.
Congratulations, Wanda.
Yep. Just by answering a few questions, you're in the fan club and you win this week. So a mug is on its way to you.
Nice.
And that brings us to...
I love that segment. All right, I'm going to go first. And this mail is actually from our ketogenic forums, and it's from somebody called Richard Morris.
Hey, I know that guy.
He's a troublemaker.
Definitely.
So I actually heard on a TV show in Australia called The Project a video of a child trying Coca-Cola for the first time.
So this isn't a very nutritionally dense male, is it?
This is not a nutritionally dense male. This one has a kid trying Coke for the first time.
That's pretty funny, too. Let's watch it together.
Yeah, sure.
All right, here we go. And 1, 2, 3, go. So she must be about 2.
I think so. She's sitting in a high chair.
Eyes go back in their head. One eye is fluttering, the other is open, and their head goes way back.
Oh, no.
And she's passed out. And now she's happy and taking another sip.
Sugar rush.
That is hilarious.
I swear I saw every emotion pass that little girl's face as she was encountered Coca-Cola for the first time in her life.
Bubbles up my nose. What's going on, Mom?
So sweet.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
So what do you got, Carl?
Well, I have also a post from the Ketogenic Forum. This one's from back in December of 2016. So this was one of our original Facebook members who got in early, right? Because we opened up the doors before we let the public in. But this is from Rookie. And he basically asked to start a thread or a forum or a conversation with a keto-educated physicians list. So he wants a list for the keto-friendly doctors that we can recommend. And I thought this was interesting because a couple of days later, Naomi says, I think that's an awesome idea. I'm on the quest for a physician who would be supportive of this lifestyle.
Right.
I live in Denver, Colorado.
Ah. And
our friend Tom Cease jumps on, here you are, the Denver metro area, Dr. Jeffry Gerber, jgerbermd.com. And she replies back, well, thanks. I'll give him a call. How exciting. But I guess Jimmy Moore's got a list of doctors, and that was put in there.
Yep. Low Carb Down Under, I've got one.
Yep. Low Carb Down Under, exactly. And some other ones like from Olympia, Washington, and that kind of thing. So it's a good place to, and I want to see some more people posting keto-friendly doctors in here. Yep. That's a good place. Good resource.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've actually spoken to a number of people in Canberra who were looking for a physician who was at least aware of what a ketogenic diet was, and I've passed on details to my physician and the practice she works in.
Yeah.
Because both she and a number of the doctors there are at least aware of a ketogenic diet. My physician actually does the Michael Mosley 5-2 diet, which is where she eats moderately for 5 days and then fasts for 2 days every week.
Yep, that's very popular. And the opposite is popular too now, fasting for 5 days and then feasting for 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heard you say you're due for a little. Well, Richard, I'm very, very happy to welcome to the show, finally, after all these months, and I almost said years, but after all these months, Dr. Jeffry Gerber. And he's if you don't know who he is, he's a board-certified family physician and owner of South Suburban Family Medicine in Littleton, Colorado, where he's known as Denver's Diet Doctor. He's been providing personalized health care to the local community since 1993 and continues that tradition with an emphasis on longevity, wellness, and prevention. Nutrition and its effects on health are areas of interest to Dr. Gerber. And you can read the rest of his bio on the website. You know him, you love him. It's Dr. Gerber. Welcome.
Hey, Carl and Richard. Thanks for having me. The last time we met was at the Low Carb Breckenridge Conference. And Richard and I had a great day on the slopes.
We did. It was awesome.
Yeah, and it was really fun. A great conference. Great to meet you. And I wanted to thank you for inviting me to the Keto Fest that's coming up shortly.
Oh, we can't wait. Breckenridge was a really cool venue, and I guess all you guys like to ski, and that's one of the reasons that you go there. But it was the first time I had been at that altitude, and I was a little woozy for a while.
Wow. So yes, we do like to ski, and honestly, the majority of people that come to the conference aren't skiers. But you have to admit that it's fun. It's a beautiful place.
Beautiful.
In the winter to be there. It's at 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
We have to, what is that, 3,000 meters? We have to do the conversion there.
I think it's the other way around, 30,000. No, you're right, 3,000. You're right.
Yeah, I think so it's high. And, next year, we already have the conference planned. In fact, it's going to be the first weekend in March 2018. And we're moving to a hotel up the street. And they have not only bars or a bar, but they actually in the bar have an oxygen bar.
Oh, that's
nice.
Cool.
And I've been told that 20 minutes at the oxygen bar can really help with the altitude sickness.
Well, we bought those little canisters of oxygen, didn't we, Richard? That we were all hitting on the whole time.
Yeah. I noticed actually when I had my, because I was jet lagged, I'd flown from Australia, and they say that jet lag interferes with altitude sickness. And I noticed quite a severe altitude sickness that was only relieved with oxygen. But the other interesting thing I found is that normally my ketones I run very low, between 0.2 and 0.8 most days. I'm just one of these people like Tim Noakes who just doesn't produce a lot of ketones. Even if I fast for several days and do 2 hours of exercise, I still won't produce a lot. But when I was at altitude, I had like ketones of 4 millimoles per liter. So that was remarkable.
I think you were in the audience. We were sitting next to each other, and you pulled out your blood sugar meter, and your ketones were off the chart. Yeah, dude. I think I remember that. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So you and Ivor come in a pair, right? I mean, you guys work together. He's the engineer and you're the doctor, and you guys have this nice working relationship. What is that like? I mean, and how did you guys meet? Yeah,
so we met back in 2014. I had created a presentation that I'd given in several different venues, and eventually put that up on YouTube. And then Ivor Cummins comes along, and he puts a post up, the cholesterol conundrum, and I got a hold of it, and I said, who's this crazy engineer? He's talking about health and nutrition. And I realized that we had a common interest immediately in cardiovascular health, nutrition, and diabetes. And so we connected immediately. And, way back then, I think we had a Skype session, and I said, boy, we need to collaborate. And he said, what do you mean by collaboration? I said, I don't know. This is just really fun. And I think it's a great message. And we had first met at the conference in Cape Town, the Low Carb Summit. That was back in 2015. Where we actually came up with this idea of working on a book that will hopefully come out here the end of the year or the beginning of January. And don't even want to share the title with you yet, but we are discussing general health, nutrition, cardiovascular disease, longevity, hyperinsulinemia, just the general things that we've been talking about for years.
And so how's your work complement each other? I mean, he doesn't have the medical background, you don't have an engineering background, but I assume that there's a little bit of overlap there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, Ivor's a chemical engineer. That's his background. And I've always been a techno nerd, geeky person, always interested in science, technology, engineering. I probably should have gone into engineering, but I come from a family of physicians.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of in my blood that was where I was headed. And so, we've just kind of brought it all together, and it's just, the team is a great way to bring a message of better health and nutrition to the public. And, I think healthcare professionals really connect with Ivor's engineering message, and he really brings the science into it. And what I do is bring the clinical perspective into it. Now, it's somewhat interesting. I've been doing this now for almost 18 years.
Wow.
And it's just in the last couple years that I've met Ivor. So, I kind of didn't know what I was doing way back when, but I knew I was onto something and I just kept going with it. And what I've seen over the last 18 years is just, it's really blossomed. And,
right.
you know, I come to meet people like you and people like Ivor, and it's a global phenomenon. It's just wonderful now.
So how did you get to the original thesis 18 years ago? Because you must have been quite an outlier.
Yeah. Certainly, Richard. My interest starts actually from childhood. And my parents, my mother was the diet expert. And, you know, back in the 1970s, she went through every diet in the book.
Wow.
You know, I had struggled with my own weight. My father, my brother, we all had personal health issues. And so I think from young childhood, I was interested in diet and nutrition. And then going into medical school, of course, we're taught the basic aspects of nutrition: eat less, exercise more, low fat, low calorie. And it kind of didn't make sense to me. And about 10 years into my career, because I've been doctoring now for 28 years.
Wow.
There were several factors. Yeah, I've been at it for a while. Patients came to me saying that they were trying these new low carb diets. There was a challenge from my father-in-law to try low carb for myself. And then I started to read about metabolic disease. And it was just an awakening to me at this point where I realized that it's possible that we had it all wrong.
Yeah.
And then we started to focus on insulin, you know, metabolic disease, and starting to challenge the diet heart hypothesis, the lipid hypothesis, which we had no time to challenge back in the day. We were just so busy in medical school saving lives. And so, this is where, I got involved back, 18 years ago. And, doing my own homework and studies and looking at the literature, I realized that there was enough evidence to really support what I'm doing. And there's even more evidence today to support this approach.
Yeah, it's got to be easier for doctors these days because there's so much more actual evidence into low-carb diets. I'm just thinking of like the Verta study that just came out the other day. These things are coming out every day that are showing that what you started doing 18 years ago is in fact the right approach for metabolic syndrome.
You must have all sorts of clinical evidence as well in your own practice. We know that, Dr. Eric Westman's treated, 4,000 patients or something like that, and have had no real failures. I mean, every single one of them improved.
Right. So I've actually done, and I've tracked over 2,000 glucose tolerance tests that I've done on my patients.
Wow.
And that's not all the patients that we talk to nutrition about. In fact, we don't do glucose tolerance tests on everybody. But, I have a lot of clinical experience now over the years. And in the book that we're writing right now with Ivor, we're going to actually share some of the patients' stories. And,
great.
Some of them are amazing. For instance, we have a patient who, had been going to the university hospital here for years and not having any significant improvement in their weight. HbA1c was running in the 11 to 12 range.
Ouch.
And all they wanted to do at the university was put her into studies looking at insulin therapy and just standard nutritional advice at all. If at all, that's all they would talk to the patient about. And then the patient actually on her own, with her partner, did some of her own homework and discovered low carb and keto. And she came to see me a couple months afterwards just to support what she was doing. And in 3.5 months, her A1C went from, and I kid you not, from 12 to 5. And she lost 50 pounds. She got off all her medicine.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because I had exactly the same experience. Mine was 11.2 and it's been 5.2 ever since I hit a ketogenic diet. And I did the same thing. I did the research and then found everyone online and basically taught myself. And then for many years I was just by myself, just plugging along doing it. Then ran into Carl and he said, I want some of what you got. And,
yeah, right. Oh, mine was only 7.4 though, but it's 5.2 now as well.
Right.
Yeah, so I knew you guys had similar stories, but it's just great to see significant changes like that. Now, I have to say, not everybody has it easy.
Yeah.
No.
And there are some challenges. So we see women in particular who are actually metabolically healthy on the inside, but
okay.
they're metabolically healthy, but they're not at their ideal body weight, and they have this amazing capacity to store healthy subcutaneous fat.
Right.
And they're the toughest ones to help lose weight.
Yeah.
So my little pearl with my patients is that my job is to help control people's appetite. If I can control people's appetite, they're not going to be as hungry. They're going to eat less. They'll eat less frequently, and all is good. And so sometimes with those challenging women, we may have to focus a little bit more, believe it or not, on the quantity of food. As well as, low carb and keto are still approaches, but it gets a little bit technical in terms of what you want to do with these people.
Right.
So I don't know if you're familiar with protein sparing modified fasts.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but tell the listeners anyway.
Yeah. So protein sparing modified fast, it goes back years, and so it's really a low carb, low fat diet. The problem is most people are starving. And it's the induction period that's really the challenge. And so this is where we feel that a low carb diet or even a keto diet can help you get into a mode where you're now burning your own body fat. So you're fat adapted. So once you achieve fat adaptation, you can now reduce the fat calories that you're consuming. And I believe Steve Finney actually talked about that. So a low carb, high fat diet actually can turn out later on, once you're fat adapted, to be you're consuming low carb, low fat, but what you're burning inside is still low carb, high fat because it's coming from your own fat stores.
Yeah, so long as you don't let your insulin creep up and block those fat stores from being burned. Yeah, and you're not hungry.
Right, because that's the problem. If your fasted insulin is over 13, you have diminished capacity to liberate energy from body fat. And so, if you're one of the unfortunate people who is insulin resistant, not these women who are insulin sensitive and have extra weight, but somebody who is insulin resistant, then their ability to do something like a protein-sparing modified fast is limited by the fact that they can't access their body fat for energy.
Not going to work. You're right.
Yeah, I found that we've for most of this show we've been talking about if you're hungry, have some fat, and usually that fat comes with salt, and I've been finding that salt by itself is pretty good at knocking out hunger. And ever since the salt show that we did. Richard, I mean, it's our standard thing. If you're hungry, have some bacon, right? And you're not hungry anymore. Oh, it must be the fat. But, what about all the salt in that bacon?
Maybe it's the salt. Yeah.
Maybe it's the salt just as much and maybe more. Maybe it's the salt alone. Maybe there's something there. So I don't know what you think about that, Jeff.
Well, if you haven't already interviewed James DiNicolantonio, who just came out with the salt fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we've been recommending pink salt, any kind of salt to our patients for years because we know there's so many benefits. And it's such a paradox that it's completely opposite to what we've been taught.
Yeah. But, by now we're used to living with paradoxes, aren't we? I mean, it seems like just, pile it on. Why not?
Yeah, speaking of that, the American Heart Association is quite a paradox.
Yes.
Well, Is that a nice way to say wrong?
Yeah, right. And that raises a point is that, I want to work with inside the healthcare system.
Right.
In other words, I don't want to take an adversarial approach. And, one of the other docs who was at the Breckenridge conference, Mark Cucuzella, he's a hospitalist. And the idea is we want to bring about change from the inside. And so my big contribution is actually offering educational credits to healthcare professionals to these conferences. Now, you guys haven't asked to do that. Your conference is slightly a different format, but we want to teach healthcare professionals. Yeah. We don't want to badger them. We'd love to work with the American Heart Association, but they're just set in their ways, unfortunately.
I'm actually skiing with Rod Taylor, your partner, who did the low carb conference in August, and we're going to do a one-day event with a couple of doctors. We've got the doctor for the Australian cricket team is going to be there, and a couple of dietitians. So that's going to be a mini event, nothing like Breckenridge, but it'll be 1/10 of the size. But that's the Threadbow.
Well, that's great. Well, we might be headed to recruiting heart associations. I know that Ivor Cummins and Dr. Scott Murray, he's a cardiologist in the UK. They're going to be participating in a large cardiology conference coming up in the fall. So, we'll see what happens, and we'll see who shows up at these conferences. We get the credits for the Breckenridge conference, and I've also been working with Doug Reynolds for the Low Carb USA conferences. So there's one coming up in San Diego, and we're working on credits for that as well.
We should organise to attempt to get credits the next time we do Keto Fest. Not this time, but maybe the next time round, because that sounds. We are actively approaching physicians and family doctors. In fact, we gave away 40 free tickets to anybody who wanted to come to Keto Fest and bring their doctor. We would give away a free ticket to the doctor to sit with them and actually watch the event, because our theory was if most of these doctors are seeing 3,000 patients a year, then between now and next year, that's another 120,000 patients who have had access to a doctor who is at least aware of the fact that a ketogenic diet is a possible treatment for metabolic syndrome.
Yeah, and that you're not going to kill yourself on it.
Yeah, to get as many as you can would be great. And, doctors are attracted to educational credits and free food.
That helps.
That's true.
But I think also doctors have a vocation. They're not doing it to make money. I'm speaking to the expert, I guess, but of somebody who's doing it for the vocation of trying to help people. I mean, this is most doctors I know. That's their primary reason they got into the business. And if you're seeing metabolic syndrome patients, I mean, we're talking about between 55 and 75% of Americans are most likely on that slippery slope. It must be so frustrating to see these people every day and not have any treatment other than maybe bariatric surgery that's going to be able to reverse their diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a bit of altruism in especially primary care, family doctors, and internal medicine. But, you'd think most doctors went into it to help people. But certainly I've now learned about what primary prevention is. And it's, it's easy. It makes sense. It all fits together. And so, we do this every day with our patients, but these conferences can bring this to a much larger audience, the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So again, we all need to do our part to, educate healthcare professionals and, of course, the general public.
So we have 40 healthcare professionals coming to Keto Fest for free. We gave away 40 tickets, so there will be people there. A couple people from Yale. I know that.
So these are people, we're not going to be, preaching to the converted here. These are
hopefully
not nutrition naive healthcare professionals in a sense. You just said come to the conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's philanthropy. That's great.
Yeah. So hopefully some of them will get to talk to you and the other doctors and experts there. And yeah, I think it's a great thing. Besides, Westman is doing the Heal Clinic on the Friday before, this coming Friday, I guess, if you're listening to this at the right time. And they're also allowing local healthcare professionals in for free. So
excellent.
It's a great thing.
Yeah. We should get educational credits next year for the conference.
Great idea.
Yeah.
If you could pick one dynamite, amazing factoid or slide from your deck that you're going to show at Keto Fest, what might it be for those who aren't going?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can get into the American Heart Association, and
let's do that.
Yeah.
So look, these guys are at the helm, and the ship is going down fast.
Yeah.
And, they come out with a paper this year that says, guys, the prevalence of heart disease is rising at a rate much faster than they anticipated. In fact, they just said in this report this year that by 2035, they're anticipating that almost half of the American population will have some form of cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful paper because incidence and prevalence are very difficult numbers to get at. And yet they've collected enough data to say, hey, this isn't working, okay?
Yeah.
And okay, but they don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, because then they come out just a couple weeks ago with the the presidential advisory saying that we're going to still stick with this diet heart hypothesis thing that Ansel Keys came up with way back in the 1950s, and we're going to cite 4 papers from the 1960s as evidence.
Yeah.
To say that you got to drop saturated fat from your diet, and they have to start thinking about metabolic disease. They even recognize it, they identify it, but it's like professions are on the line,
right?
And
jobs.
I think it's jobs. It's ego. People talk about money and politics. I think it's more of a personal thing that, people just can't admit that they went down the wrong path.
Yeah. Not only that, Jeff, I think that there's a lot of people are just, let's face it, just addicted to carbohydrates, and, they've sort of lost their judgment about it. I mean, we talked about this with Gary Fettke. I couldn't imagine when I was before keto and before low carb that I would ever not want to eat bread. I just couldn't imagine myself in that state where I wouldn't be attracted to sugar and carbohydrates. And yet here I am, just a few months later, and I don't need that.
And that reminds me of, the food industry and farming. What are we going to do with all the corn and the grain?
Right. Feed it to pigs.
And the soy. Yeah, feed it. Yeah, feed it to pigs. And so at the beginning of the conversation, we said that there's so much evidence now. And so the American Heart Association are stuck. Okay.
Right.
And, we've looked at the past 50 years, and first of all, we can really, find holes in all the 4 studies that they quote, and the list goes on and on. I mean, there's meta-analysis after meta-analysis that just continually demonstrates that there's really no strong relationship between eating saturated fat in the diet and heart disease.
Right.
In fact, what was it? Harvard. Yeah, in fact, Harvard went back and they looked at the Minnesota Heart Study. They looked at the Sydney Heart Study.
Yeah.
And they the anthropologists of health science went back and pulled the data out from the archives and reanalyzed and said, if you replace saturated fat with omega-6 PUFA, actually heart disease went up.
Yes, and all-cause mortality.
All-cause mortality, yeah. So completely the opposite. So, nobody has to convince me anymore I just think that, I joke that, we need to take off our cholesterol glasses and really understand the big picture. Now, we can think about cholesterol. It's still important. It is perhaps a contributing factor, but it's only a small part of, what inflames the blood vessel.
I found a study the other day. In fact, I've been banging on for the past year and a half about these two studies that were done in the 60s. One was a dog study where they made dogs diabetic and then gave them their insulin to equalize their glucose. But they gave it in one femoral artery, and they produced dogs that had cardiovascular disease in just one leg. And so that was the first thing that clued me in that maybe insulin is responsible for this. And the other study was there's a rabbit study. There's a rabbit model of atherosclerotic progression where if you feed a rabbit a diet it's not supposed to eat, like animal cholesterol, it becomes atherosclerotic. And they found that if they made rabbits diabetic, then and unable to produce insulin, then the rabbits were protected from atherosclerosis, and that really shows, one, that insulin is necessary, but also that it's sufficient to produce atherosclerosis. Well, this other study that I just found the other day was another rabbit study where they then took the rabbits that were protected from atherosclerosis by becoming diabetic and gave them the insulin that their pancreas would have otherwise made, and they all became atherosclerotic. So, really, insulin is the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, you could think of insulin as a master hormone, but there's many other signals, and I think we're still learning, but the idea is that we have to really look at the broader picture. And what we've been doing that with our patients now for 18 years. And although, I don't do research in my office, my clinical experience, I've seen patients reverse their diabetes, lose weight, prevent heart attacks, and it's a joy to see them improve.
How about kidney function, Dr. Gerber? Do you find people who have kidney problems are hesitant to do a low-carb or ketogenic diet? I'm finding this in my personal life, so it seems to me the opposite. But that is a common myth that's out there, that ketogenic's hard on the kidneys.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that are believed to be bad on the kidneys. And initially, way back when, it was concerns that a ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet would be a high-protein diet, which would be hard on the kidneys. And
the reason is because of the ammonia production and uric acid and all that, right?
Yeah. So, protein can be a problem in patients that have end-stage renal disease. We call it chronic kidney disease, stage 3 or stage 4. And so, maybe limiting protein is something to do. But, in what we do in the clinical setting, in the primary care office, our patients don't have kidney disease like that. We do have a few that are off seeing the nephrologist. We do have a few patients in dialysis, but for the general population, there's really never any proof that protein is dangerous to the kidneys.
Right.
Now, regarding, ketogenic diet or nutritional ketosis, that's of course completely different than ketoacidosis, which is a dire state of complications of type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And that you can get into trouble. But when we're talking about nutritional ketosis, we're putting patients on a diet where we're reducing carbs, and that first of all is about as healthy as it gets for your kidneys. It lowers your blood pressure. You don't reduce salt to lower blood pressure. You reduce carbs.
Yeah.
Right. I think Charlie Mobbs wrote a paper on a mouse study where they found that they were able to reverse diabetic kidney disease with a ketogenic diet.
That's right. I remember that
one. I mean, look, if you consider the majority of renal disease is microvascular, it's and that's again an atherosclerotic condition. The same way that you're treating atherosclerosis in the heart, diabetic retinopathy in the eye, diabetic kidney disease. It's all essentially
neuropathy.
It's vascular disease. The approach is the same. Again, you want to address, insulin essentially.
Yes.
And yeah.
Well, that's great. Like I said, I have some personal friends who were scared of their doctor told them that, it was hard on the kidneys. And indeed, a doctor told me that back in the 90s that, the Atkins diet, you got to watch out. There's, we don't know what long-term effects will be on kidneys. But, now we know people who have been low carb and ketogenic for 18, 19 years.
Yeah. Well, so you can do some blood markers to measure your renal function, but this really leads me to what we think is just a wonderful test to really look at vascular disease, and this is the heart calcium scan, and when I've known about it for a long time, but like most primary care doctors, we thought that this heart calcium scan was a test that was created by cardiologists to get them more business.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then over the years, actually, through my collaboration with Ivor Cummins, we learned a lot more about the power of the calcium scan. And what it is, it's a CT scan of the heart, and it's a gated high-speed scan where it can see the calcium in the tiny little coronary arteries as the heart's beating. And calcium is basically representative of plaque. And so the more calcium, the more plaque you have and the higher your risk. And it's just a wonderful tool to predict, to predict risk. But what's important is when you look at the blood markers, they're really just risk factors, whereas the calcium scan, it's a marker of disease.
It is disease, yeah.
It is disease. It's night and day. And so we think it's probably the most important tool out there in terms of screening for cardiovascular risk. And most primary care doctors have no idea about the test.
Yeah, it's actually looking at the actual disease rather than a surrogate endpoint, a surrogate marker like LDL. And going back to what you were saying before about the Sydney Diet study and the Minnesota coronary experiment, both of those were able to change people's diet and make their LDL cholesterol go down. But in both cases, their heart disease and their all-cause mortality both got worse. So that just goes to show you that when you're following these surrogate markers like LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol and all of these other, good, bad, good, and whatever, the meh cholesterol, you find that these things just don't, they're not looking at the actual disease. And I'm proud to say I've got a zero Agatston score or zero calcium, coronary artery calcium score. So,
yeah.
I know I've got no heart disease.
I gotta find a place that does it around here too. I'm gonna do that this year.
Carl's done an intima, a carotid intima.
Yeah, ultrasound. No plaque.
That's good. You have no plaque there. So, with the carotid test, to us, it's kind of a surrogate to the heart calcium scan, although you're looking at a different blood vessel. And it's not the intima thickness that I'm necessarily interested in, just to see if there's plaque in the carotid artery.
Okay.
But getting back, Richard, to what you said, Ivor and I have found now about 17 studies that show that LDL cholesterol doesn't, as a surrogate, doesn't correlate with calcium score prediction.
Right.
And so what does that tell you? If you find a surrogate that doesn't correlate with the gold standard, you probably shouldn't be using it.
You're not looking at the disease.
It's telling you nothing. It's not telling you if you have disease or not. It's associational nonsense.
Right.
Is what it is.
So there was another study that showed non-causation based on non-correlation, which was the one where people with heart events were admitted to hospital emergency rooms and their cholesterol was measured, and it turns out the average cholesterol was low.
Right. This is the get with the guidelines that
yes.
Yeah, so like the 2009 study. So it was almost 140,000 patients hospitalized with acute cardiac events, and then they measured their cholesterol. And what they found was 3/4 of the patients were at goal, cholesterol goal.
Right.
And so the question is, well, if they're at goal, what were they doing in the hospital having heart attacks?
Right. So there's non-correlation. And doesn't non-correlation mean non-causation? Unless you have other confounders? But that's got to be a big coincidence, doesn't it?
I don't think you can bring causation into it because the study was just associational. But you can challenge an existing hypothesis or a null hypothesis, say that, elevated cholesterol causes heart disease as an association. So here you're saying, well, here's a study that an associational study that challenges that hypothesis. Yeah. It shows the opposite. So it does cancel that out. The hypotheses cancel each other out, basically. Yep.
So the funny thing is, if you ask a lobbyist for the statin industry, their first thought's going to be, oh, well, we're not lowering cholesterol enough.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we are showing The Widowmaker at Keto Fest, the 1-hour version. And for those who don't know about it, why don't you tell us what that movie's all about?
Yeah. Well, The Widowmaker was produced by David Bobbitt, who is a successful businessman in Ireland, and he a couple years back went to the U.S. and had his own calcium score, just randomly. I think maybe he had met with Bill Davis, and he had a really high score of 900.
Ouch!
And shortly after, because of the high calcium score, and not understanding why he had it, he was a very healthy, still very healthy, very active, exercised, maintained ideal body weight.
He was a jogger.
Yeah, he still is. And he was wondering, well, why? I'm a healthy guy. So he happened to find out, well, he was diabetic.
Oops.
Yeah. So he
had no idea at that point.
Was he type 2 or type 1?
It was type 2.
Well, he must have been type 2. If he was type 1, he didn't know it. He would have known it.
Yeah. Right? I don't have all the details, but when we see thin diabetics later in life, that they may have a degree of loss of beta cell function at that time.
Right.
Or there may be some underlying immune problems such as type 1.5 diabetes, what we call latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So there may be a little bit of that going on as well. But the bottom line is he found out that he was diabetic. And then he says, why don't people know about this test? And so again, David is very generous, and his philanthropy kicked in, and he basically funded this wonderful movie called The Widowmaker movie. And it basically talks about the power of the calcium scan. I have to admit, there's a bit of theatrics in the movie, to kind of make its point, where it kind of puts the calcium score up against stents, and to make the point that, all the cardiologists and the interventionalists they put stents in people. Now, a certain amount of that is definitely true.
Sure.
And well, we don't want to do calcium scans, because if we do calcium scans, we're going to lose money, because the calcium scan will say, well, you don't need to put in stents.
Right.
So a bit of theatrics, but it just really, the movie is wonderful documentary that really teaches the public about, the power of this test.
Yeah. There's one other point I want to make before we say goodbye, which is that, we talked about the American Heart Association, but there's also a couple other government agencies that are involved in what we eat and what, is supposedly healthy. The FDA and the USDA. USDA does the food pyramid, of course, and the FDA. I just read the story, and I shared it with you just before we started recording, Jeffrey, that the FDA claims Frosted Flakes are healthier than avocados. So according to the FDA guidelines, avocados aren't healthy because they contain 4.5 grams of fat, per whatever. And Frosted Flakes are healthier because they have almost zero fat. And then, they actually talk about Pop-Tarts being healthy. And what was the other thing? It was crazy.
Salmon, probably.
Oh, salmon was unhealthy because of the fat. Yeah. And, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that the Frosted Flakes and the Pop-Tart lobbyists, they won the battle on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, that's
what it comes down to, where our peak bodies are captured by their funding source, which in a lot of cases is the industrial food.
Well, I think that, I'm in this wonderful position because I'm a healthcare professional.
Yeah.
And I can just jump right over that stuff and say, I'm here, I'm looking at the health of my patients. And
right.
I want to give them, the best advice that's going to keep them living the longest,
yep.
feeling well. And, they live a long, healthy life and, they drop dead at the end from some infection or something. And, I'm not here to lobby, to fund industry. I still prescribe medicine, but very little. So I don't work for the pharmaceutical industry. So, and the message is the same for you. We're here to help the general public.
Indeed. Jeff, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you in a week or so.
That's right.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Well, it's almost embarrassing that we have waited this long to have Dr. Gerber on the show.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He was there pretty much from the get-go.
Right. Yeah.
18 years he's been practicing as a low-carb doctor. So that's remarkable.
It's awesome.
And I think he's been low-carb for most of that himself as well.
Right. Yeah, and of course, one of the first low-carb conferences in the United States.
Right.
Was his outfit there. Very cool.
I think that was in Vail as well, the first low-carb conference that he did.
Yep.
Yeah. And now he's doing them every year in Breckenridge.
Yep.
And they're doing some in Australia as well, so that's awesome.
Awesome. All right, man, you hungry?
I'm a little bit peckish, yes.
All right, then let's make some
Recipes.
Okay. You first?
Yeah, okay, I'll go first.
All right.
So I'm talking today about a recipe that I've been working on that I'm actually going to show in the cooking demonstration at Keto Fest.
This is one of your 6 ways to do pulled beef?
That's exactly right. Today it's going to be Hungarian pulled beef or paprikash beef. And the way that you make this is, first of all, you need some pulled beef. So how we get pulled beef is we get a slow cooker and we put in 3 large chuck roasts or 1 large bolar roast. And the chuck roast is a 3-pound roast. It's really quite cheap and it's delicious if you roast it for a long time.
Yes.
The bolar is about 3 times the size of a chuck roast. Both are approximately from the same place on an animal. On a cow, or in fact on most mammals, the shoulder area carries a lot of fat and it's marbled through the meat. So you end up with a very fatty meat if you get meat from the shoulder.
Nice.
Both of these cuts are from the forearm, sort of really the back of the arm near the armpit of the animal. So
it's like the butt, you would call it on a pig, the pork butt. It's the shoulder meat.
Yes, exactly. And so what I do is I put meat in a slow cooker for 10 to 12 hours. What I want to do is I want to get it to the point where the meat just starts to fall apart. And I can get a couple of forks in there and just start shredding it apart. So to cook the meat, I put a little bit of water, a little bit of liquid of some kind in the bottom of the pan because I don't want the meat to catch before it starts rendering out its fat.
Yeah.
And you can add a couple of aromatics. I add bay leaves. And in the case of when I'm doing pulled beef, I use thyme, lemon thyme, for example. You don't really need to season it, salt it, and we can do that later on.
Okay.
So I cook this beef for 10 to 12 hours and you'll see a lot of liquid in the slow cooker and you'll think, oh, I've got to drain off that liquid. No, leave that liquid because that's gold.
Yeah.
What we do is when we shred the meat, those meat fibers drag up that liquid and hold on to it. And so that's really where the flavor is. The actual fibers themselves have lost a lot of their flavor. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I take this pulled meat and I put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. I portion it up into one Ziploc bag for 200 grams worth of meat, and that's approximately 2 meals. So I'm cooking for Julie and I, so I'm basically putting our night's worth of meat in a bag, freezing it in the freezer, and it might stay there for, a couple of months. It could stay there a couple of years in the freezer quite happily. So that's the first step. You're getting a freezer full of beef, all pulled and all rolled up. Now, the next step is how do you make a meal from that? So the first thing is I take one of these bags out of the freezer, chuck it straight in the microwave and give it a minute, and that's going to soften it, basically going to defrost the meat. I get a pan going on the stove, and what I want to do is I want to start to develop some flavors. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of fat of some kind. I like to use lard, but you could use butter. Anything that you're just basically getting enough fat in the pan so you can sweat some onions.
Yeah.
I chop up onions very finely. Basically, a small onion would be enough for 2 people in this meal. You don't need a lot, but it's for the flavor. But then I put a lot of garlic in. So for this particular meal, for 2 people, I'd put 4 cloves of garlic, maybe 5, 4, 5, 6 cloves of garlic. Wow. So it's a really
7,
garlicky meal.
8, 9.
Yeah, or 7 or 8. Keep going. Put the whole head, put the whole head in. And so you want to chop up the garlic or use a garlic press to crush it, and you're going to toss that into the onions. So we've got sweated down onions. We're adding some garlic to it. Now the next step is I buy roasted peppers, or they're actually bell peppers or capsicums that have been peeled and roasted and then stored in a jar with some oil. And these you can roast them yourself, and in fact it's quite easy to roast a whole batch of peppers and then freeze them and reconstitute them and use them that way. But I just find it's easier just to buy roasted peppers in the jar already made. And I put a whole bell pepper, chop it up, put it in the pan, and then I add about a teaspoon of paprika, smoked paprika flavor.
Yeah.
It's a spice that's going to basically really kick it up a notch. And so now I have the onions, garlic, paprika, and the peppers chopped all in the pan, and then I add the meat from the microwave to that, and I basically stir the meat and let it start cooking in those spices.
Yeah.
And what that's going to do is it's going to combine the developed flavor of the pulled beef with these new flavors, and it's going to produce a meat that tastes like it's been cooking for 4 or 5 hours in these spices, but you've only just introduced it. This whole thing takes like 5 minutes to make a meal. So at the end, when I take the pan off the range, I stir in a little bit of sour cream, so maybe 2 tablespoons of sour cream through this, and that's
I can taste
Hungarian
it now.
Pulled beef paprikash.
Oh man!
And I'm going to make servings of this at Keto Fest.
Oh geez. You're going to do that times 6 in a half an hour? Oh, my gosh. You're crazy.
Well, I'm going to do 6 different meals.
I know.
You'll have to come to Keto Fest to taste it.
Yeah.
So, Carl, what have you got for us?
Well, I love New Orleans. I'm just saying. I love
jazz.
I love the music. I love
Creole.
the bourbon. I love Creole food. And I love some of the things that came out of New Orleans, like the muffaletta sandwich.
What's muffaletta sandwich?
Well, the muffaletta sandwich is typically on this huge, almost an entire loaf of Italian bread with sesame seeds on top. That's crusty on the top and soft. And then you essentially combine cold cuts, cheese, and an olive salad that's drenched in olive oil, and that goes on the sandwich. So that's essentially a muffaletta sandwich. But I obviously don't want to do it with bread. So my recipe is a muffaletta salad.
A salad?
A salad.
Interesting.
So the key to a muffalata flavor is an olive salad. It's sort of like chopped, pickled things and olives. So what I do is I use olives, roasted red peppers, some hot pickled peppers, and like pepperoncini, marinated artichoke hearts, and I also put in a sprig of rosemary because I love rosemary, especially with this kind of flavor. Sure. And you can also add garlic, oregano, celery, capers, any other flavors that you like, but just to get a nice, tangy, tart, salty salad, 3 different kinds of olives, the green olives, the brown olives, the black olives, just, to mix it up a little bit to get that really tangy, you can taste it, can't you?
Oh, yeah. I've got garlic and rosemary running around in my head right now.
Oh, yeah. Now, the cold cuts you're going to use spicy capicola ham.
Okay.
All right. Sliced thin. Also cooked salami sliced thin. And mortadella.
Mortadella, yeah.
Mortadella is kind of like a very porky bologna with chunks of fat in it. It's really, really good. And for the cheese, I use sharp provolone and fresh mozzarella. So fresh mozzarella, you get the balls that are in the way. They're very soft, and just chop it up to get that kind of almost sweet flavor, but not sweet, but you know what I mean, just very mild.
If you really want good mozzarella de buffalo.
Oh, yeah. Or burrata.
Yeah, that's the stuff. Yeah.
Oh, my.
I'm getting the hungry in the middle of your recipe. You realize that?
Yeah. Well, okay. So essentially you start with a few cups of salad greens and you put that on the bottom and you just layer this stuff in and mix it all up. That's pretty much all there is to it. Now, I'm using like a 1/4 cup of olive oil because the olive oil is going to be my fat for this dish. And you want to make sure that you use enough of it. You can either toss it in the olive salad and then pour it on over, or just, once the whole thing is mixed together, you can douse it in olive oil, whatever you like. And just, it's probably pretty salty enough. So, maybe you could add a little salt if you want to, but it's pretty salty with all the olives and the cold cuts. And then, some black pepper and you've got a meal.
Nice. You've got a meal, but you could also have a smaller portion on the side of a meat.
Absolutely.
On the side of a serve of meat. So, that sounds wonderful. I've got to try that.
Yeah. Muffalata.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, that's another show down the tubes.
Yep. Of course, if you have anything that you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something you don't agree with, or some more research that you found to support or refute anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter at 2ketodudes, on Instagram at 2ketodudes, and make sure you use the hashtag 2ketodudes. And of course, if you want to join our forum, it's forum.2keto.com. And if useless swag is your fancy, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other junk with witty keto sayings on them, head over to gear.2keto.com. And if you want a shot at getting that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our podcast and our forums, hit the donate button on our website at www.2ketodudes.com or just go to donate.2keto.com. You can also see our podcast and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com. And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on iTunes.
Yeah. 2 Keto Dudes is engineered by Brandon Wen for Pwop Studios and produced by Carl Franklin, myself. Pwop Studios started in 1999 as a full-service audio and video production facility with podcast production experience since 2002. Online at pwop.com. Keep calm and keto on, buddy.
Yeah, keep calm and keto on, Carl.
All right. We'll see you next time
on 2 Keto Dudes.